Welcome to Really Old Movies. I'm your host, Harrison Scullin, and today for our third in the Director's Series, we'll be discussing Frank Capra. And these are 5 movies from Frank Capra's career that not necessarily are my top 5 since I haven't seen his whole filmography, but 5 movies that I kind of picked randomly and just wanted to see how good or how bad they were, so forth. And I'm really excited to talk about it today because I actually had a hard time putting this list together and putting in an order, and so stay tuned for that. And so before we get started, let me start sharing. So this is Frank Capra right here, and as you can see in the background, he's known for It Happened One Night, Arsenic and Old Lace, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, It's a Wonderful Life. He did several really popular movies, and some of which have even won Best Picture, either wins or nominations. And so he's got quite the illustrative career. So let me read a little synopsis about his life from his Wikipedia page. So Frank Russell Capra, born Francesco Rosario Capra, was born May 18th, 1897, and he died September 3rd, 1991. He was an Italian-born American film director, and he was also a producer and writer who became the creative force behind some of the major award-winning films of the 30s and 40s. Born in Italy and raised in Los Angeles from the age of 5, his rags to riches story has led film historians such as Ian Freer to consider him the American dream personified. And that's a major theme you see in a lot of his movies is kind of Americana, right? And people down in their luck who end up being good at the end of it. So I'm sure his life really played into many of his films. So now I'll talk a little bit about his style. So Capra's directing style relied heavily on improvisation to a great extent. He was noted for going on set with no more than the master scenes written, and he explained this reasoning. What you need is what the scene is about, who does what to whom, and who cares about whom. All I want is a master scene, and I'll take care of the rest. How to shoot it, how to keep the machinery out of the way, and how to focus attention on the actor at all times. And so because of that, you could get a real sense of the actors really putting their all in the film because they're kind of improvising, they're kind of making it up on the fly. So it feels a little bit more realistic. So a lot of his dialogue feels very natural, I would say. And then to continue on, according to some experts, Capra used great unobtrusive craftsmanship when directing. And he felt it was bad directing to distract the audience with fancy technical gimmicks. Film historian and author William S. Pechter described Capra's style as one of almost classical purity. He adds that his style relied heavily on editing to help his films sustain a sequence of rhythmic motion. And I highly agree with that. I mean, if you watch all of his films, or at least the 5 that I've seen so far, you could really get a sense of his editing style. He has like crazy Dutch angles, and he does a lot of montage sequences and a lot of overlay and whatnot. Really creative cinematography. And it's all him, he's very talented, especially in the editing field. And I myself love film editing, and so I just had a blast watching these. All right, and then Pechter said, describing his editing, Capra's editing has the effect of imposing order on images constantly in motion, imposing order on chaos. The end of all this is indeed a kind of beauty, a beauty of controlled motion, more like dancing than painting. His films move at a breathtaking clip, dynamic driving taut, at their extreme, even hysterical. The unrelenting, frantic acceleration of pace seems to spring from the release of some tremendous accumulation of pressure. I agree with this because if you see, for example, like Mr. Deeds Goes to Town, uh, John, D- I'm sorry, not Mr. Deeds Goes to Town. Meet John Doe. He's walking down the street, right? And there's a lot of pressure going on because people are saying, how good he was, how bad he was, and you could just see him just going crazy, and it explodes at the end, of course. So, yeah, it was beautiful, beautiful editing, and I'll get into that when I discuss that film. But yeah, super talented guy, talented acting, well, directing to his actors, talented editing, all around a really, really good director. And so I'm really, really excited to get into this. So without further ado, let's talk about my number 5, which is, speaking of, Meet John Doe from 1941. So, one second here. So let me give a short synopsis from the film's letterbox page. A fired reporter named Ann Mitchell prints a fake letter from unemployed John Doe, in quotations, who threatens suicide in protest of social ills. The paper is forced to rehire Anne and hires John Willoughby to impersonate John Doe. Anne and her bosses cynically milk the story for all it's worth until the made up Joe's philosophy starts a whole political movement. So, yeah, it starts out as kind of a way for Anne Mitchell to get back at her bosses. And then it just turns and culminates into this crazy political movement to the point where they even consider starting a third party to compete with the Democrats and Republicans. So, yeah, it's a really crazy film, kind of snowball effect, or a butterfly effect, if you will, too. Very, very interesting plot. And so, my thoughts on it, I loved it. I think Frank Capra did fantastic in this movie as the director. Again, his visual style is all over the place. Like I mentioned before, the scene with John Doe walking down the street and people saying, you said you were going to commit suicide, but you didn't really want to, or all this stuff going on all around him, and you could tell it's boiling up, and he's tensing and all of that. Really, really fantastic. And I give a lot of credit to Gary Cooper, who's pictured here on the left, and also Barbara Stanwyck on the right. Um, they had great chemistry together. They were really the stars of this film. They were fantastic in their respective roles. And so I gave the film a 4.5 out of 5, which is a really, really good score. I loved it. The only issue I really had is there were some scenes that were a tad bit too long. Like there's the scene where there's a townsman. I think he's like a soda spray guy or something for one of the local shops. He tells John Doe his experiences talking to his neighbors and stuff, which is a fantastic scene. And it really sets up tension that happens later on with this guy. But I felt it went a little bit too long. It was probably, I want to say like 7 or 8 minutes. It was a pretty long monologue, basically a monologue, which is fine. I think it could have been trimmed down to a good 4 minutes because after a while, you're like, okay, we kind of get the idea. You went and started talking to your neighbors and whatnot. But other than that, it was a fantastic, wonderful film. I highly recommend it. I think it's a good intro into Frank Capra's filmography. So yeah, those are my thoughts on Meet John Doe. So now let's talk about my number 4, which is Arsenic and Old Lace from 1944. And this one stars Cary Grant. So here's a plot synopsis from the film's letterbox. Mortimer Brewster is a newspaper dramatic critic, playwright, and author known for his diatribes against marriage. He suddenly falls in love and gets married. But when he makes a quick trip to tell his 2 maiden aunts, he finds out their hobby, which is killing lonely old men and burying them in the cellar. So I don't know if any of you have seen this film. Criterion released a version of it last year, and on I think it was Blu-ray and 4K. I want to say it's a wacky movie, but I absolutely love it. It's all over the place. Cary Grant, who later on said he hated his acting in this movie, was fantastic. He was way, way over the top, and it was awesome because everything around it is over the top. When you read the synopsis, you're like, oh, his aunts are serial killers, right? But the way they talk about it, the way they are is really dainty. Like, oh, yes, dear. He was very lonely, so we put him out of his misery. It's like, what? You did what? It was hilarious, man. No, I love it so much. It's so wacky. It's so crazy. And um, I gave it a 5 out of 5. I loved it. The first time I watched it, I thought it was a little too over the top. But the second time I watched it pretty recently, I was like, no, this is a good movie. This is a great movie. And I'm actually going to be, actually, by the time this comes out, I've already would have done a synopsis or a review rather of this movie. So if you want more in-depth details, go to that. I'll put a link to that in the description. But yeah, no, it's a great movie. Love Cary Grant and I love his aunts. I also really like Peter Lorre. He makes a cameo in this movie. He's hilarious as Dr. Einstein. He's very reluctant to kill. He's like, "No, Johnny, I don't want to do it. No, Johnny." And then Johnny Brewster, he looks like Boris Karloff. They keep saying, it's just a wacky movie. And I don't remember his name, but there's an actor who thinks, well, an actor who plays a character who thinks he's Teddy Roosevelt. Hilarious. He just yells "charge" and runs up the stairs. It's a wacky, fun movie, and it's got Frank Capra's style all over it. At the very beginning, there's like a montage with a baseball scene and whatnot. It's really crazy. Like the baseball literally hits the camera and all that. It's really, really interesting. It doesn't have all of his style because most of the film takes place in the aunt's house, just because it's based off of a stage play. But yeah, you could tell it's a Frank Capra film too. So yeah, Arsenic and Old Lace, 5 out of 5. All right, so now I'll move on to my number 3, which is It Happened One Night from 1934. This one stars Clark Gable and Claudette Colbert. Just a plot synopsis from the Letterboxd. A renegade reporter and a crazy young heiress meet on a bus heading for New York, and they end up stuck with each other when the bus leaves them behind at one of the stops. So the way I would describe this movie is a romantic version of Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, if you've seen that. They just go on crazy misadventures together cross country. And this is probably one of my favorite scenes here is when he's biting on a carrot and he's trying to hitchhike and he, to no avail, no one wants to. And then she decides to give it a try and she lifts up her skirt a little bit and then a car immediately stops. This is hilarious. Um, so getting into my thoughts, I give it a 5 out of 5. I thought it was excellent movie. They have great chemistry together and it feels really realistic. He's kind of arguing with her all the time and they're bantering and whatnot. It's a very realistic relationship and I love it. They just have such good chemistry together. And I think it honestly deserves the best picture win and also for director, actor, actress, and adapted screenplay. I believe it was also a stage play if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, it's a great movie. If you love Clark Gable, you're gonna absolutely love this movie. I haven't seen Claudette Colbert in any other film. I think she's in Cleopatra by Cecil B. DeMille, and I'll be discussing that one once I get to his filmography. But yeah, this is a great movie. Real fun, real romantic. So you and your spouse can enjoy this one. It's really, really excellent. I highly recommend it, and that's why it's my number 3. And like I said, this was really hard to do because I pretty much gave all of them 5 out of 5. I was like, well, crap, I gotta I gotta rearrange these somehow. But I feel comfortable with its position here because my number 2 film is this one, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington from 1939. Oh man, where do I start with this? I guess with the plot. So, a naive and idealistic Jefferson Smith, played by Jimmy Stewart. Nope, that's my dog. Sorry, guys. Um, Naive and idealistic Jefferson Smith, played by Jimmy Stewart. He's the leader of the Boy Rangers, which is basically like the Boy Scouts. He's appointed to United States Senate by the puppet governor of his state. He soon discovers upon going to Washington many shortcomings of the political process as his earnest goal of a national boys camp leads to a conflict with the state political boss. So yeah, um, myself and Nathan Hale from Nathan Hale Classics, we did a review of this film that will be coming out in July. So I'll kind of save some of my thoughts on it for that. But I gave it a 5 out of 5. It was a fantastic movie. I gave credit to Frank Capra again with his beautiful montages and camera angles. Like there's one scene where they're in a Lincoln Memorial, and you could see some of the words talking about all men are created equal, and then it cuts to a black man who's standing there teary-eyed. Like it's very, very good, very patriotic. Uh, Again, Jimmy Stewart, he steals the show, man. He's fantastic, especially once his filibuster scene starts. It's incredible. Claude Rains, incredible. All around, incredible movie. And I'm glad I got to do this series because, I've been wanting to watch this movie forever. I just never the stars never aligned, if you will. And once I saw it, I was like, okay, I need to talk about this movie. This is fantastic. And I'm glad Nathan Hale also recommended it for that review that will be coming out soon. So when that comes out, I highly recommend checking it out as well. He has some great thoughts on the movie as well. But yeah, overall, fantastic movie. Highly recommend it. 5 out of 5. It's amazing. I don't know what else to add, but yeah, it's incredible. All right, so now we'll talk about my number one film, and it's just a no-brainer. It's A Wonderful Life from 1946. This is probably the quintessential Christmas movie. It's probably, to me, it's my favorite Christmas movie of all time. And before I get too far ahead of myself, let me read the synopsis. It's obviously I give it a 5 out of 5, right? So, a holiday favorite for generations. George Bailey has spent his entire life giving to the people of Bedford Falls. All that prevents, all that prevents rich skinflint Mr. Potter from taking over the entire town in George's modest building and loan company. But on Christmas Eve, the business's $8,000 is lost and George's troubles begin. And so, my thoughts, this is the greatest Christmas movie of all time, 5 out of 5. And it's also one of my favorite movies because of the character of George Bailey. We don't just get to see, his struggles once he loses the $8,000. We see a little bit of that, but we actually go back and see his whole life. So that at the end, like in this scene here, at the very end of the movie, even George can see how great of friends and family he has, like the famous line, "No man is a failure who has friends." It's a wonderful look into the life of a man who felt all of his dreams and goals were pushed aside, and he never really got to do what he wanted to do. And he felt kind of like a failure. He felt stuck where he was at, stuck in Bedford Falls, stuck at his dad's business, um, stuck in a ratty old home, and he just felt stuck. And what man can't relate to this? What man who's started out with a young family and whatnot, who hasn't felt what George Bailey feels in this movie? And I think that's the beauty of it, is it appeals to everyone. Everyone can relate to this. I mean, not everyone's religious, of course, and there's that aspect of it. But again, just even looking at your own life, like look at the blessings you have, right? That is what will get you through the hardest and toughest of times. And I think that's the beauty of this movie, is it shows that. It shows that, it may not go exactly the way you want it to, but if you look around and see the wonderful things you do have in your life, no pun intended, you'll be a lot better off. You'll feel a lot happier. Again, I had the line of, no man is a failure who has friends. And I really believe that. Because fame and fortune are fleeting, they come and go. But if you're alone at the end of your life, no friends, no family, nothing like that, that's pretty depressing. It's much, because that's really what matters at the end of the day, is family and friends and just having people around you. That is more important than any other type of fortune. And so I love this movie. Frank like I said, Frank Capra, man, he knows what he's doing. He really captivates the soul, man. It's amazing. And so, yeah, this is my favorite Frank Capra film, and honestly, it's one of my favorite movies ever too. I want to say it's in my top 10, at least top 20. It's up there, man. It's excellent, excellent movie. This is probably one of the few classic movies a lot of people have actually seen. And so, if you haven't already, which is unlikely because it's on TV, it's everywhere all the time, but if you haven't, please check it out. It's a great, great movie. And it really, like I said, it really helps you look deep within yourself. You know, very deep, deep story, deep film. All right. So, So that's Frank Capra's filmography. My goodness, man, he has some great, great films, some real heavy hitters. Um, yeah, I highly recommend checking out these 5 movies. And if your favorites are on list, let me know in the comments your thoughts on it. I am definitely watching more of his movies. He is slowly becoming one of my favorite directors. I can't disagree with Nathan Hale when he says that because he says he's his favorite director. So I don't think I could disagree. Like I said, I had a hard time deciding what order to put these in because 4 of the 5 movies were 5 out of 5. I was like, well, crap. So, yeah, he's great director, really appeals to the American dream and also just life in general. So, excellent, excellent director. I think he's severely underrated. You never hear about him when talking about great classic directors. And I think that's a shame. His movies are certainly bigger and more popular than he is. So I guarantee that the general audience, if you hear Frank Capra, you're probably not going to know who he is, but you're going to know his filmography. So yeah, I think we need to look more into his filmography. They're fantastic movies. And yeah, that's Frank Capra, man. I'm really, really excited to check out more. All right. Well, thank you all so much for watching today's episode in our director series. And so I'll be announcing the next one right now, and that will be Cecil B. DeMille. He'll be our next director, and this will be finally live. I'm actually out fishing right now when this video comes out up in Bishop Lake, so this is why it's pre-recorded. But the Cecil B. DeMille one will be live July 15th at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time here on YouTube and also on Rumble later on. So again, thank you all so much for coming by today. And like I said, if you have 5 other movies that you really like from Frank Capra, let me know in the comments below. But again, thank you all so much. This has been Really Old Movies. I'm your host, Harrison Scullin. Take care.